There were some anecdotes of people in like the 1910s on a carnivore diet. They went to visit Inuits, and then they already ate like that. So set aside, I don't think you'd see so many people on a carnivore diet 60 or 70 years ago when people didn't have these chronic diseases. I don't think my diseases would like existed exactly back then. But I think if you're dealing with people now, pushing for regenerative farming also mitigates the issue that we could potentially be pushing a diet that's going to increase chronic disease.
The illness she had that caused all of these symptoms is not mysterious. It has been explained by science. It was proven with a blood test. She had Lyme disease. End of story.
I'm on antidepressants now, and I don't know how anybody in my family would have really survived without them.
Not pretty. And this is me now. This is me on the lion diet. The lion diet is strict, and it'll fix your problems and turn you into a boss human. I've seen thousands of people recover using this diet. It sounds crazy, but it's true. It involves only eating ruminant animal meat. Organs are fine. High fatty cuts, like ribeye or ribs. Salt and water. It's as simple as ruminant meat, salt, and water.
Skepticism. Easy to preach, difficult to practice, especially when there are scientific claims being made by someone selling you a diet book, wearing a bikini, promising to cure your depression, make you feel great, make you look great, give you the body of your dreams, while at the same time helping you indulge in some of your bad habits. Maybe this total ideological package appeals to your ego a little bit more because it also tells you your doctors are wrong. This woman knows something modern medical science is concealing from you, but the doctors have failed to apprehend.
Everything we've been told about health is a lie.
Everything we've been told about health is a lie.
I don't have scurvy or vitamin deficiencies. In fact, I'm healthy now. Thriving.
In fact, I think I can pretty much read off the top of her website. The top of her website says that the food pyramid is a lie, that the whole of nutritional science is wrong. She's overturning the accumulated wisdom of centuries and of so many men with long gray beards wearing lab coats. Here it is, our savior in a bikini. And it's not going to stop until someone takes her to court. The difference between science and pseudoscience is a lawsuit. So she's engaging in 3 stages of deception here. Number 1, make the illness seem mysterious. Number 2, make the cure seem mysterious. And then number 3 is trust her, buy the book, believe in the cure, etc. She told you a whole lot of things there about diagnoses she received, but mysteriously she omitted the one that really counts. Lyme disease. The illness she had that caused all of these symptoms is not mysterious. It has been explained by science. It was proven with a blood test. She had Lyme disease. End of story. From an early date, possibly from when she was a small baby or a toddler, she had Lyme disease all along. Gee, that list of symptoms, it sure seemed mysterious until you had a diagnosis of Lyme disease that for some reason you don't mention here in selling your diet book.
Which I think it might. And at least I think we need more studies to prove that it doesn't.
Yeah, I understand that concern, and I think a lot of vegans would be quick to dismiss it with reference to, as I say, like dietetic associations saying that veganism is healthy. It's like we need to take this stuff very seriously. You know, scientific communities being like, yeah, we've done some studies and it seems pretty safe to be doing this to our children. It's like we need to be really sure about this stuff. So although I guess I'm pretty optimistic about the idea of a plant-based diet being nutritionally adequate, I wouldn't want to dismiss those concerns, and we would like to sort of amplify that I care about them too. But there's kind of a way of avoiding both problems, which would be cultivated lab-grown meat. Even if we're sort of not sure what we think ethically about taking the lives of animals if they've had a net positive existence, which I'm actually quite sympathetic to the view that if they genuinely have a net positive existence, and that existence is parasitic on the idea that they will be killed eventually, that might actually be good for the animal, probably is good for the animal.
I'm asking you to take seriously how stupid this is. I'm asking you to really take a minute to reflect on how stupid or how evil someone would have to be to advance this so-called net positive argument. The book you see on screen right now, I've read about the first 150 pages of, and then, to be honest, I threw it away. It describes in detail rape and murder that transpired in Vietnam. It describes American soldiers holding women at gunpoint, raping them, and then murdering them at the conclusion of the act of rape. Who in their right mind would say that those women had led a good life, a meaningful life, a wonderful life up until the moment that crime was committed, therefore it is a net positive? Who in their right mind would say that the American soldier holding the woman at gunpoint enjoyed the act of rape so much, perhaps he enjoyed the act of murdering her so much, that when you put this through the utilitarian pleasure-pain calculus, when you think about how fleeting and momentary the suffering is when someone is shot through the head with a bullet, compared to the quantity of enjoyment these men were getting out of raping and murdering the women, that in fact, it's a net positive. When we talk about stupidity in our culture, it's normally a joke. When we talk about evil, it's normally a joke. I'm not joking. I'm asking you to take seriously the stupidity and evil of some of the most prominent leaders of the vegan movement, some of the most prominent public intellectuals of our time. My claim about this whole category of moral philosophy, the whole ethical and political approach of utilitarianism, is not that it's meaningless, but that it is irrelevant to ethical questions, to questions of right and wrong, questions of whether or not we should do the right thing just because it's the right thing to do.
Now, my biggest disagreement with Eisel with regard to ethics is in the derivation of his ethics rather than the ethics themselves. So firstly, Eisel dismisses ideas like maximizing net happiness or minimizing suffering as meaningless or worthless. I know we can't accurately measure these things, but I think we can estimate them, and these estimations are essential to ethical judgments and argument.
So my claim is that the sphere of deontology, sphere of ethical philosophy and making decisions about what we're going to do and what we're going to do, is separate from, is not overlapping with, the sphere in which we could ask in a meaningful and useful way these questions about net happiness. Torture. The military and the police using torture. Is it ethically acceptable to torture one person in order to extract information, in order to compel a confession that could save the lives of 100 people? This is an ethical question. This is a matter of deontology. This is a matter of right and wrong. This is a matter of doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So from my perspective, this kind of pleasure-pain calculus, which is the original terms used by John Stuart Mill, this idea of net happiness is totally irrelevant. For some years now, Sam Harris, I don't know what to call him, practical philosopher Sam Harris, political philosopher Sam Harris, has been touting this notion of a net positive value being ascribed to the life of an animal. And his point is that he thinks it would be permissible to eat the flesh of an animal if their life was, in contrast to what he perceives as a net negative in the world's current system of factory farming, if this animal's life was instead a net positive. Now, again, Sam Harris, he is a devout Buddhist, despite his claims to being an atheist, and I've had other videos discussing that. You can read his work in print, in which he explains to you just what a devout Buddhist he is, and how he's willing to bend over backwards to make it seem as if different doctrines and magical notions in Buddhism are based in science or can be validated by science. So there's actually a little bit of overlap between these two examples I've chosen. A pig. Could we possibly say that the life of a pig is a net positive if the pig's life, entire life, is less than 12 months long? Can we possibly say that the life of a pig is a net positive if it's castrated? And I just note, most slaughterhouses, most factory farms now are not even doing surgical castration. You can look into the gruesome and painful method of castration that's used to be more economically efficient. If a pig is born, castrated, it has its largest teeth torn out of its skull with no anesthetic so that it can't grow these tusks, and then is killed after just a few months. It does vary from farm to farm. There are farms that kill pigs after only 4 months. You can look it up, the different methods and cycles. But as you'd imagine, part of the efficiency of factory farming is trying to get the cycle of raising these animals to be as few months as possible, because every month that the pig's alive, it's eating rather than being packaged as meat. Now, with just these few principles here, because to me, of course, this is a ridiculous notion, the idea of the net positive life of an animal on a farm. But by pressing forward and saying, could we actually produce a set of criteria that could be legislated? What is that principle? How would it be legislated? How would it be specified in law? How would that law be enforced? In just starting to think that through, all of a sudden a lot of frankly pointless, counterproductive questions drop out of the debate. The for-profit farming of hogs, the profitable farming of pigs, would completely cease to exist with just these few legal stipulations. So if the pig had to live for, what's it going to be? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? How short can a pig's life be in captivity and still be calculated as a net positive? Now, there are other questions that are very obvious. What about artificial insemination versus the pig actually reproducing through selecting its mate, through having some natural behaviors, etc.? You can come up with a checklist. It's a completely surreal exercise. But my point is exactly to highlight how surreal that inevitably must be. I think the significance of raising legislation is first and foremost to disambiguate the ethical arguments we're engaged in, and say, no. This isn't just about the parlor room. This isn't just about standing in front of a chalkboard, or this isn't just about standing in the drawing room of a Buddhist monastery, a somewhat peculiar setting I'm familiar with, and talking about these ideas as somehow having validity in and of themselves. Let's talk about real world consequences, and let's let at least the thought of those real world consequences guide and discipline the decisions we're making now. Either procedurally torture is correct or incorrect. Either this person is innocent until proven guilty and has the right to a trial and the right to remain silent, or they do not. There are all kinds of ethical questions to be asked here, and even procedural and bureaucratic and legal. Okay, but there is no question to be asked. There is no salience. There is no relevance of taking this abstract equation whereby you have an imaginary amount of pleasure and enjoyment, and then you subtract the amount of suffering and pain, and then ask, well, how much is left over? Is it a positive or negative number at the end of the equation? Absolutely, by definition, any evil whatsoever can be justified by this equation. Now, net happiness. Think about the meaning of the word net. It's like net profit. Okay? So net profit. You earn a certain amount of money, and it costs you a certain amount of money. You lose a certain amount of money. So you subtract the losses from the profits, and what do you get? You get the net income, net profit, what have you, okay? In the same way, you're talking about some posited quantity of happiness or enjoyment or well-being, and then subtracting the misery, the harm, the torture, the suffering you inflict, whatever it may be. Any evil whatsoever can be justified this way, including killing cows in order to eat their flesh. There's no end to it, okay? What about taking taxpayers' money to build a casino, right? There's suffering caused by a casino. Poor people are going to get poorer. People are going to lose money. People's lives are going to be destroyed by gambling addiction. There's also the actual use of resources, of taxpayers' money, when you could have been building something else, these negative things. But then who can quantify the enjoyment? Who can quantify how much happiness this casino will bring to the people? How much entertainment and gambling, and maybe there'll be music and dancing and alcohol and cigars, and there's going to be a fancy hotel. You can inflate in your own mind's eye, in your imagination, in your estimate, the supposed pleasure being created by this casino, and it can justify any amount of pain. What about torturing someone to death in order to build a casino? What are the units of this calculus? It's completely surreal. It's not that I'm all that interested in treating as valid Sam Harris's notion of the net positive life of the animal on the farm. But in a sense, one way to direct the conversation back to what it is we do want to do, the positive difference we can make, which most obviously includes personally living by a vegan diet, adopting a vegan discipline, is exactly to say, well, okay, if you sincerely believe this, if you really believe in this criterion of drawing a line between a net positive and a net negative life, which, ultimately must be a completely subjective and cultural claim, just like, we draw a line for when is the age of consent. Well, in some countries it's 16, in some countries it's 18. At what age can somebody drive a car? At what age can somebody own a rifle? Some of these lines, we all know, they're arbitrary, and yet, if we're going to discuss them seriously, there's a pretty limited range of options for where this line is going to be drawn. If you really believe that this is a line that is there to be drawn, at what age can you possibly say, this pig has lived a good life? This pig in its steel cage underneath a shed without seeing the sky, this pig, having never reproduced, having never been a part of a normal social structure for its species, having never been a part of a pack, having never explored a forest, having never lived as a wild animal, having never exhibited any of its natural behaviors or traits as a feral pig would, as a wild pig would, this pig living in confinement, eating out of a trough, never foraging, never exploring, this pig, after how many months, after how many years could its existence possibly be calculated as a net positive to justify your decision to kill it, drink its blood, eat its flesh, to nourish yourself? I mean, it is an absolutely surreal proposition. But I think someone supporting that position, I don't know how many people Sam Harris represents with this philosophy of his, I think they're only really forced to think through how surreal it would be when we invite them to disambiguate and clarify their position. What exactly would you legislate? Net positive may sound viable in the abstract. Let's bring it down. Let's make it concrete in particular. Let's talk about what the law would be, hypothetically, that you'd enforce for these farmers. And then right away, I think that's going to discipline the debate and direct our conversation towards the difference that we can make. And as you guys have heard me say again and again here, that's ultimately why veganism is so important to me. Because as powerless and isolated as we may be, as lacking in leadership, lobbyists, and organizations as we may be, veganism is the difference we can make here and now.